Welcome to Deep Thought. Pay attention to undercurrent movements. What's an undercurrent movement? Well, anybody who's followed me for a long time know I pay attention to subcultures and class and just different groups and nuances and all of that. One of the things I found one of the things I do rather, anytime I come across a new term or somebody act like they represent something new, I pay attention to it. Like different spiritual movements. There's a whole bunch going on. I ain't gonna get into them, but I'll just say some of them are politically motivated, but they've always been there. I remember reading about them years ago. And then, of course, you got all the sexual movements and everything. You got movements on almost everything, subculture, stuff like that. Always pay attention to it. When you come across it, just pay attention. You don't have to study it or anything like that, but pay attention because you never know when it becomes political. You never know. Like stuff going on now, they've always been there. We've always had, like a big thing now is about the trans population. People call them transformers or everything, but they've always been there. They've been there for decades, maybe centuries and everything. But people didn't pay attention to them, but they become relevant. Different spiritual movements, they've always been there. People think it's something new. It's like, nah, they've been there. Like stuff within the community. See, understand something. When you look at the mainstream media, the mainstream period, they only promote a certain narrative. Basically a narrative of, you behave a certain way, you buy certain things, you do certain things. Yeah, and that's always promoted through the media, through any mainstream institution that you're used to. But then there's always an underground. There's always an underground. There's always a shadow world. Now, people who follow me know I talked about the sexual shadow world, which has always been there. It's nothing new. It's nothing new. People might think it's new, but it's not new. People just not talking about it. It's always been there. I will use a religious example. The Nation of Islam. The Nation of Islam. People didn't really hear about them until the late 50s and 60s, particularly with the advent of Malcolm X. But they had been around since the 30s. They had been around since the 30s. Many other groups, many groups have been there, especially political groups, spiritual groups, lifestyle groups, everything. Always pay attention. And the way I would say pay attention to them is once you discover it, you don't have to study, but just kind of put a note in your mind. It's like, oh, okay, let me see what this is. Like whenever I'm on social media, just going through some stuff and I see a hashtag, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Boom, let me see what that's about. Like one now, let me get a little political, the whole trad wife thing. And yes, that is political, traditional wives and everything, because it's going against I would say the feminist perspective and everything, but talking about going back to a mythical time where, women just stayed home and everything. And I say mythical because other movements had been trying to get them out of that anyway. But like I said, that's a mainstream perspective, but I'm paying attention to it. It's like, oh, okay, let me see where this goes. Because the thing is, one of the things that any movement wants to have, well, two things, freedom, and then at some point, power. So you might not think about them early. You might not think about them when you see different things. And you might just say, oh man, that's just crazy. That's just crazy stuff. But if they get in the right positions, it becomes a power thing. Because usually what'll happen is, they might start out underground, but then might start agitating for more rights or better visibility. Might get in a political position to put laws into place. In fact, I'll give you one now. There's always been a movement around marijuana, cannabis, smoking it. You know, now you have half the states who have laws where you can smoke it. It's legal. You can just use it now. It's cool now. You know, that was an indirect movement. And it wasn't so much as political as people were just using it. Like I remember years ago, I think it was in the state of Washington. This was before all the legalization and everything. They just weren't prosecuting it. And I remember there was some news documentary, and it was like a mayor, governor, or something right there, on attorney general, somebody official. They talking. They say, "Look, we just don't prosecute it." Somebody walking by like that, you know. And I was like, but that was a movement. You know, pay attention, especially to movements that can be big, because everything that starts, like if you hear something about a particular movement, spiritual movement, political movement, anything, lifestyle movement, and especially if it's something that can affect your life, pay attention now, because it's always there. Nothing just comes out of the blue. Nothing just comes out of the blue. And I noticed, like I said, I've been studying subcultures to the point I could get a PhD in sociology just studying subcultures. I've been doing that since the mid-90s. That's why I can say, you know, like a few weeks ago, I did something on the black community and different groups within the black community, which anybody knows. Anybody who's actually black knows there's different groups within the community. But I started paying attention to that more, you know, even more than I was. And then you start seeing differences and everything. And like I said, even all over, even in the autism community, they actually have a culture where they're not trying to cure it or anything. They see it as just something regular. In fact, the deaf community, that's actually what started me on the whole really paying attention to subcultures, because I was working at the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division Disability Rights Section back in the mid-90s. And I had met some people who were deaf, and that's why I found out about the community. I mean, they have a language and they don't look at it as a disability. And you know, that was very benign, but then there's others out there that could be a problem. There's so many. I would just say pay attention to them. That's the main thing. Pay attention. And I call them undercurrent movements because, well, they're not in the mainstream. You're not thinking about it yet. But then when they pop up, you got to be like, they were always there. You know? They were always there. They just opening up now. And, you know, it's like a lot of times, in fact, let me use an example. And this ain't necessarily a movement, but lefties. And I don't mean political lefties, I mean literal left-handed people. My youngest son is left-handed. And I remember a woman, she was doing a TED talk and she said, you know, a long time ago, a lot of people weren't left-handed, but really they were. It was because people were being forced to use their right hand in schools, you know, to write and do everything with their right hand. But what happened was they stopped doing that. All of a sudden, all these left-handed people popped up. It's like, well, no, they were always there. So the movement can be on several levels. So, but pay attention to them. Just pay attention, all right? Once again, that's just a thought thing, but you never know how it could become political or it could affect your life, or when that movement could be against your life. Because there's movements out there that want to oppress other people. Pay attention to them. Pay attention to every little thing. All right? So anyway, that's all I have for now. I'll get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.